So what if Apple decided they wanted to release iPhones at 2 separate times of the year? Now, I'm not just talking about the iPhone SE in March. That's kind of a departure from the main lineup. It's just kind of there once every 4 years or so. It's not that regular of a thing. I'm talking about taking the iPhone 11 in the 10R series, you know, the more affordable, the iPhone for everybody. It's not the maxed out model by any means, but it covers the basics, releasing those maybe in March, and then leaving the Pro models, the ones that have the best displays and the best cameras that not everyone needs, but us tech enthusiasts care a lot about, releasing those in September, or swap them around as long as they're 6 months apart. Maybe leave the Pros for March and the regular phones for September. There's rumors of this going around, and I wanted to kind of weigh out the pros and cons, feed that information to you so that hopefully you can come up with a decision of your own on whether or not you think this is a good idea. For the record, I'm pretty split on it too, so let's begin. I think talking about some of the benefits, because I like to consider myself an optimist, would probably be good to start today's video with. So what are the benefits of separating the iPhone launch for Pros at 6 months apart from the other? Well, for one, it does mean I think you should get the latest generation tech sooner, because there's 6 more months of development for whatever that March release is going to be. So currently, an issue that Apple can struggle with, that companies like OnePlus and Samsung don't have to, is that when there's new hardware and when there's new technologies available, they can implement them on the next generation phone, which is most of the time just a few months away. So it usually ends up resulting in more iPhones being available with better tech than before, because currently Apple has to wait a full year before they implement new hardware and new technology on the entire lineup. Another pro would just be from a tech person's viewpoint. We'd have a lot more to talk about in the YouTube space if there were 2 iPhone events a year that were 6 months apart. Apple events are fun. They're kind of interesting. So while they would probably have less things to get excited for, if we had a big event to look forward to in March and also a big event to look forward to in September, that'd be kind of cool, you know, just kind of celebrate twice as much instead of it being just a one time a year thing. The other benefit is a peak interest in sales. If you guys remember a few years back, Apple used to release a product red version of the iPhone, usually in the March timeframe, which nothing internally on the phone actually changed, but it got people talking. And when you have more people talking about your release, more people are starting to look at your store and your site and may decide for themselves, you know what, that color does look pretty good, this update is recent, so I think I'm gonna go pick up that model. This would be kind of a more extreme version of that, because maybe there's people who bought the Pros in September or whatever, or bought the regular iPhones in September, but then March comes around and there's a new suite of iPhones, whether they're cheaper or more affordable, but they have some type of new tech maybe that the last generation iPhone did not have, even though it was just 6 months ago, and then that brings more eyes, that brings more interest into, oh, some new iPhones just came out, so maybe I should check those out. So from a business standpoint, I think Apple could stand to benefit a little bit from that. If iPhones don't have just one big release in September like they've had for so long, and instead have 2 big releases a year, one for the tech enthusiasts, one for the everyday consumers, yeah, I could see them making a bit more money from that if they cover media more often times of the year than they don't. There's lots of different Android phones coming out all year, which can kind of take the spotlight on YouTube and that kind of thing. So if Apple chose 2 different times to premiere their big iPhone release, then they could dominate media even more often. The other benefit is perhaps the events themselves could go way more in depth if they knew that they did not have to cover, you know, 5 to 6 different iPhones on one keynote. You could go way more into depth on what actually they changed year over year if these events were divided up and you had some iPhones come out at the beginning of the year and some at the end. So we could probably get more information and maybe some less fluff at the events as a whole. Okay, I'm a little desperate now. That's all I can think of for pros. Let's get into the cons, because I'm sure plenty of you are thinking of them yourself, and don't get me wrong, they're in the back of my head. A lot of the things I listed as pros are pretty much double-edged swords. So while, yes, it would be nice that Apple could update their iPhone twice a year, meaning when new technology or new hardware becomes available, they can implement it quicker, it also means the older model becoming outdated and devalued probably pretty quickly. That would be quite frustrating if, like, the 12 Pro or whatever comes out in September and we all get it and we're like, cool, this is nice, but then the regular 12s come out in March, or I don't know what they're gonna call them, but you know what I mean. The average everyday iPhone comes out in March and it's cheaper, but it actually has some hardware that outperforms the regular Pro. Then a lot of the people who bought the Pro iPhones are gonna feel kind of cheated. They're gonna be like, oh, well, I could have just waited and saved some money. It's only been 6 months and this phone is already rocking dated hardware because that new iPhone that came out already has better hardware. It can start to distort the lineup a little bit when you start to have more affordable iPhone rock some specifications better than the Pro iPhones, even when their launches only half a year apart. The other issue it might interfere with is devaluing people's phones, because a big reason a lot of people choose iOS is because iPhones hold their resale value really, really well. So when you're ready to upgrade your phone, you can sell it and use that money to pay for the new one. But if there's a new iPhone coming out every 6 months, it will probably devalue your iPhone a lot faster than currently, where iPhones only come out once a year. That would be a big sad for a lot of people. People would get depressed. Another con is the events themselves may not be as interesting if there's not as much hardware to talk about. See, if we only talk about the 12 Pros or we only talk about the 12s at one of these events, they'll probably not be as feature-packed, and knowing when is a good time to buy an iPhone may be confusing for a lot of people, because they're like, well, this really seems okay, but I could wait 6 months and see what they're going to come out then. And it just results in a lot of people feeling left out, a lot of people feeling neglected, because they picked a phone and then 6 months later they feel like it's already outdated in some way, shape, or form. Even if the 12 is significantly cheaper than the 12 Pro or things like that, the fact that iPhone launches only happen once a year kind of does make them special. It's kind of like your birthday or even Christmas, you know? If your birthday came twice a year, or if Christmas was biannual, it would probably lose kind of its value. You wouldn't think of it as that special of a thing, because this type of stuff happens, you know, twice a year. It's not that big a deal. I kind of feel the same way about launches for OnePlus and Samsung. You know, the Galaxy S10 comes out in March, and the Galaxy Note line usually comes out in August, but usually both of them don't really feel like that substantial of an upgrade, because just 6 months ago we had a phone with fairly similar features. So what it results in is kind of a lackluster unveiling and a lackluster launch of every single model that rolls out. So when the S10 comes out, it's like, yeah, that's a pretty big upgrade, there's a lot of changes, but then the Note 10 comes out and you're like, well, that's basically just an S10 with an S Pen in it, and you remove the headphone jack. So not that that exact metaphor would apply in Apple's case, but still, at the end of the day, it would probably lose some of its wow factor if we got a bunch of cool features on the Pro models, and then 6 months later, they came onto more affordable options, and we were like, yeah, well, okay, we've seen this before. It's just slightly cheaper now. And knowing when it's a good time to buy a new iPhone would probably get very wish-washy for people. No one would really know, is now a good time to order one? Is now a good time to wait? So that could confuse a lot of potential customers, and this is why personally I'm going to end today's video by saying I hope they don't do it. I actually want iPhones to be a thing that only come out once a year. If they do a SE at the beginning of the year, that's fine. I don't really count that, because that's not really something they do every single year. That's something they do once every 2 to 4 years. Little outliers like that are okay, but I think it's much easier for the resale value and for potential customers to know that, okay, September is the month when new iPhones come out. Not to mention, how would the iPhone upgrade program be affected if iPhones came out twice a year? Would you just keep paying and then have to keep trading them in every 6 months? I don't really know. It would get weird, which is why I say, Apple, things are going well for you right now. Don't fix it if it ain't broken. So I hope these rumors end up not being true, and Apple can continue releasing lots of different iPhones for everybody, but at one time in the year, not twice a year, because that's what other Android companies have done, and it kind of loses its wow factor. Let me know what you guys would prefer. Do you want it to happen twice a year regularly, or would you rather they stick with it once every September? Let me know what you're thinking by hitting me up over on Twitter or joining our Discord. This is your Apple Sheep here. I will see you in the next one.